This video is brought to you by Captivating History. The story of Constantinople is the story of over 1,000 turbulent years, ending in a dramatic overthrow by the Ottoman Empire. However, to understand its fall's causes, we've got to return to its earliest roots, Rome. When Emperor Diocletian divided the Roman Empire into two parts, the capital chosen for the eastern half of the empire was the city then called Byzantium. This city would come to bear the name of Emperor Constantine, who came to power in 330 AD, at the head of what would become known as the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople, standing at the Hellespont, the strait which divides Europe from Asia Minor, rose from the eastern half of the broken empire. Positioned at an advantageous point along the Silk Road, Constantinople grew in wealth and trade. The city's art and architecture reflected its grandeur and importance, including the great cathedral known as the Hagia Sophia, or Holy Wisdom, built in 360. This building also symbolized a change brought about by Constantine, who, unlike his predecessor Diocletian, had made Christianity the official religion of his empire. At the crossroads between major cultural influences, Constantinople was a vibrant and diverse place. At its height, the city was filled with bustling markets and luxurious goods, such as ivory and silk. As a city with both land and sea connections, Constantinople's trade flourished, but so did the opportunities for trouble. The Byzantine capital's position made it a hotly contested spot, and in 717 AD, it was besieged by ships from the Umayyad Caliphate, led by Melasma ibn Abd al-Malik. The attackers were repelled by the powerful Byzantine navy, using Greek fire. This siege showed the power wielded by the city and the strong defenses it possessed, but it was only an early precursor of the continued turbulence to come. In 1202, during the Fourth Crusade, the city was sacked by crusaders, led by the son of the deposed Emperor Isaac II Angelos. Many treasures were destroyed in the pillaging that ensued. The sacking of the city was devastating, leaving an estimated third of the city's population homeless. Still more destabilizing were the internal conflicts. Schisms within the Christian church loomed early on and would have serious consequences. The majority of these revolved around interpretations of various scriptures and church rituals. Earlier, Constantine's attempt to consolidate and establish the Christian church's beliefs had resulted in the Nicene Creed in 325, outlining the basics of the faith. However, it did not have the unifying effect he had anticipated. The churches of Antioch, Constantinople, and Rome all developed different beliefs and practices regarding using unleavened bread for the Eucharist, the celebration of Easter, clerical celibacy, and the question of who held ultimate religious authority. Finally, the Great Schism sundered the church. In 1054, Michael Cyrillarius, Patriarch of Constantinople, was excommunicated by the Roman Church. The Greek Orthodox Church emerged on one side and the Roman Catholic Church on the other. This would be a decisive blow to the Byzantine Empire's power, with Constantinople at its center. It would also destabilize allegiances and weaken bonds that had once bolstered the empire's position. Tensions, both religious and political, built over the next 3 centuries, and the Byzantine Empire splintered into smaller states. By the mid-15th century, the city and empire had declined from their former heights of power. The neighboring Ottoman Empire's presence from 1299 onward was the source of another power struggle, one for which Constantinople stood on the border, at the now choke point of the Bosporus. The stage was set for battle. As the Ottomans grew in strength and influence, the Byzantines waned. It was time for the emperor, Constantine XI, to seek help in defending the city. The major sea powers of Venice and Genoa, though aligned to Constantinople, each had their reasons for not being overly keen to help. All the same, a fleet of Phoenician ships was promised to Constantinople in their hour of need, but it never arrived. The search for the ships yielded no results, and the searchers returned to Constantinople, resigned to fight without them. Genoa's contribution was slightly more helpful, but still meager. Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, a Genoese captain, contributed 700 men, who marched to the aid of Constantinople in January 1453. Meanwhile, the emperor continued to scramble to solidify allegiances and seek aid. An attempt at religious reunification failed, despite the interests of Pope Nicholas V, who sought to regain control of the eastern half of the church. The Orthodox leaders supported this reunion, but the idea failed to garner widespread support, to where the people rioted. The internal conflict had worn away at the base of the empire, and outside the walls, storms were ready to break. Allies had been alienated during the centuries, and the empire's power had declined significantly. Weakened by its own troubles, Constantinople could not stand against the threats that approached from outside, especially since those threats included an army led by the keen strategist not about to back down. Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, at the age of only 22, was ambitious and powerful. Having constructed a fortress across the Bosporus, controlling trade through the strait, he looked to strengthen his position, and in 1453 he decided to lay siege to Constantinople. However, taking lessons from the previous failure several centuries earlier, he changed his tactics and employed the latest in battle technology to turn the city's own strengths against it. Previous sieges had been conducted with catapults, trebuchets, and siege towers, but along with nearly 70 of these, he brought cannons powered by gunpowder. The most powerful of these was described in hellish terms and brought out to the horror of the Byzantines behind the city walls. The Sultan's allies included Saxon miners, assigned to tunnel their way into the city, and elite infantry troops known as janissaries. On April 5, 1453, they made camp outside the city walls and prepared to begin the siege. As the Sultan's forces gathered outside, the city prepared itself as best as it could for the attack. Fewer than 7,000 soldiers defended Constantinople from within the walls, and between 30,000 and 35,000 armed civilians. The defending troops were drastically outnumbered. To give a sense of scale, the attacking army numbered over 100,000. Mehmed II was ready to lead a fierce offensive against a city that, regardless of its strong walls and long reign, was ready to fall. Even the symbolic elements of the city seemed to have turned against Constantinople's citizens. An icon of the Virgin Mary, long hailed as the protector of the city, was dropped during a parade attempting to invoke her help. A thunderstorm only added to the building's sense of doom. The Hagia Sophia glowed red in the darkness of a lunar eclipse. The siege lasted nearly 2 months. Cannon fire bombarded the walls, focusing on the Romanesque gate. This was the weakest point in the otherwise sturdy walls, and it was the point at which the bombardment had the most effect. Though the great siege cannon cracked under its own weight and heat, the smaller cannons, along with older siege weapons such as trebuchets, took down the city's defenses. During the siege, Constantine XI was encouraged by his counselors to flee the city, take refuge in Moria, and return when he had regrouped his forces. He refused. As wave after wave of troops hammered against the city walls, morale dropped, and the defending forces realized that they were in this to the end. On May 29, 1453, the final attack of the siege took place. Over 1,000 years of empire ended in a burst of cannon fire. Despite conflict and strife, the walls had never been breached. Now they were overthrown, and the city was conquered. Towards the end of the fighting, as the situation grew more desperate, Emperor Constantine XI was killed. It is uncertain exactly where he met his end, but some say he had stripped off all that marked him as the emperor and was only identified by the way of imperial symbols on his boots. The Ottoman Empire had won. The reign of the Byzantines was over. The immediate result of the siege was death and destruction for residents and buildings. Though Mehmed II did not wish his forces to utterly sack the city, there were scenes of violent looting, and eyewitness accounts describe horrific scenes following the surrender of the city. The Sultan himself rode to the Hagia Sophia, allowed those hiding within to leave with an escort, converted it to the Mosque Hagia Sophia, and demanded that the looting cease. In the long term, transferring power from the Byzantines to the Ottomans in Constantinople meant that the city became the capital of the Ottoman Empire, which, at its height, extended throughout much of Eastern Europe, Northern Africa, and parts of the Middle East. The siege itself, with its new weaponry and use of gunpowder, also changed the history of warfare forever. Some historians use this turning point to mark the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance. To discover more about the rise, reign, and fall of Constantinople, check out our book, The Fall of Constantinople, a captivating guide to the conquest of Constantinople by the Ottoman Turks that marked the end of the Byzantine Empire. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook for free while still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.